Today, Brennan and I are kicking off his Christmas in July feature by creating Christmas cards inspired by one of each other's non-Christmas cards. Christmas in July is a great way to get a head start on holiday cards, but even if you're not in the holiday spirit quite yet, you're still going to want to see all the ways I used lines and leveled it up. What's lines? Well, I'm glad you asked. Lines equals list, include, modify, exclude, and spin. It's my little checklist to help you create your own inspired card without directly copying. It's perfect when you don't have the exact supplies and the inspiration, or in this case, when you know you want to make changes to reflect a different season, as I'm doing today. Let's look at Brennan's card and list the attributes. First, colors. That's pretty easy. There's pink, black, and white, so it's a limited color palette. Second, techniques. I see a masked background with ink blending and stenciling. I see stamping, and I see die cutting. Finally, elements. Brennan has split his background diagonally. His focal point is a die-cut silhouette. There's a stamped sentiment in the lower corner and one grouping of 3 enamel dots as embellishments. Even though this is clearly not a Christmas card, Brennan's use of simple shapes and techniques makes it easy to change this up to work for Christmas in July, or any occasion really. Today, I'm showing strategies you can use for leveling up lines. I've made 4 cards, and we'll talk about progressing from a pretty straightforward copy to how I was inspired to change things up to really make it my own. Let's start basic. I've got a square panel here, cut to the size I want, because I know once I mask and ink blend diagonally, it's going to be harder to trim it down without ruining the corners. I've got a Hero Arts poinsettia stained glass stencil here with kind of a Nordic feel in that poinsettia pattern. And then I remembered I really want to ink blend the base color first, so I moved that to the side. I used Samba as my base coat. It's a light, bright, almost orangey red, and I used a blending brush here. I didn't really too much about getting a smooth blend because there's another layer coming. I also don't want it too dark, and I don't want the cardstock to get too saturated with ink, because then when I put the darker red through the stencil, it'll be less crisp than if this layer is dry. Okay, now the Hero Arts stencil. And I spent a second or two just getting my diagonal mask lined up with the diagonal in the design of the stencil before putting some Rockin red ink through. It moved! I just checked how bad it was before I decided whether I needed to start over again. And it's okay. Obviously my sticky mat needs some cleaning so it can grip the stencil better. And now the best part of any masking, the big reveal. Make sure when you're doing this to pull the tape straight back on itself. Now look at that crisp, clean edge. I decided that I wanted my black silhouette to be a Christmas tree. This tree, actually, which is retired. But you can see it's not a solid die. It's actually designed to create a shaker. So I can't cut a solid black tree to lay on top of my panel. So instead, I'm going to cut this tree out of my blended panel like this and put black behind it. That tree is so big, I now have 2 pieces, but that's okay. Once I put a black panel behind it, see? Perfect Christmas tree silhouette. I glued my 2 panel pieces onto the black square and then grabbed a sentiment from one of my favorite sets from Blot shop. That Christmas tree is bold and chunky, so I don't want a thin, scripty sentiment. And this little joy has thick, chunky letters which will work well with the rest of my design. I did have to cut it away from the to the world part of the stamp. Well, yes, I didn't have to, but I prefer stamp surgery to trying to mask off the rest of the sentiment. You can do what works best for you if stamp surgery isn't your thing. I inked it up with black ink. For the enamel dot embellishments, I decided to use some homemade dots that were cut in Samba and use them as ornaments on the tree. That's a big black tree, isn't it? And breaking that up will hopefully make it feel a little more festive. Finally, because Christmas needs sparkle, I added some shimmer spray. This adds a subtle amount of sparkle and it helps to soften any ink blending mistakes. Let's compare. They look pretty similar, don't they? I've included the diagonal masking and stenciling, the black silhouette, the position of the sentiment. I've modified the pink to red. My silhouette is a negative shape rather than a die cut on top, and I moved the position and number of dot embellishments. I excluded, well, nothing really, and my spin is of course my 4 1/4 inch square card and my shimmer spray. Now let's take it up a level. This time I'm going to move things around a bit. So I'm putting my black element into that diagonal blending. It's actually rainforest, which is dark green, but it's so dark it almost looks black. And I kind of wish I would have thought of this for the tree. Anyway, I decided to go direct to paper this time to get full, solid coverage on that top half, and then I set it aside to dry. My silhouette this time is going to be a die-cut sentiment in red, and I'm also moving the stenciling by putting it on here. I used the Scandinavian heart stencil from a Colorful Life Designs, but I just wanted that strip of Nordic snowflakes, so I masked off the rest with some tape. My impatience got the best of me here because that Samba ink isn't quite dry. So when I put the Rockin red through, it just kind of blended in rather than sitting crisply on top. There's a little less definition than I would have liked, but it's fine. I cut a big solid Mary from Waffle flower from that panel. So you can see that there's a pattern on there and different shades of red without the pattern being fully visible. I think if I was doing this again, I would wait for the Samba to dry and maybe choose a stencil with a smaller pattern. But again, I like this well enough. I stamped the word Christmas from that ink blot shop set on the white half of the panel with the rainforest ink, and then I stacked up the Mary word with another layer. This gives the sentiment a little bit of dimension and a more solid feel. I like layering die-cut words with cardstock rather than using foam tape because the whole word is fully supported and it won't get crushed at all in the mail. I added some of the red dot embellishments in the white area, but I felt that dark green needed to be broken up a bit, so I added a couple there as well. And of course, a spritz of shimmer spray for some sparkle. So I included that diagonal masking. It really is the strongest link back to Brennan's card, isn't it? But I modified it by making it act as my black element, and I moved the stenciling to the die cut, which is feeling not quite like a silhouette, so that's another modification. I moved my stamp sentiment, and I added extra dots, although those first three are right where they're supposed to be, aren't they? Now, let's see what else we can do. So first off, my diagonal line is not going to be straight. I'm using a simple Hills mask from a Colorful Life Designs, which will still almost divide my panel in half, but there's some curves, which is kind of fun. I decided to use pink this time. I think it always adds a fun, whimsical touch to a holiday card. And I blended it with a brush so I could get right into the curves on the stencil. I'm not sure how well the ink pad would have gotten right up into it, since the stencil has a little more dimension than mint tape. Again, I'm not too worried about it being perfectly smooth because I'm going to stencil over top. This is an old Hero Art Snowflake stencil. I love the scale of the flakes and the simple shapes that fit well with the style of cards I've been making so far. And I was all ready to put darker ink through the stencil, but to be honest, dark snowflakes kind of bug me a little bit. So I grabbed some Hero Paste instead, and I pushed myself out of my comfort zone by using that to get some white flakes and high contrast in my, well, I was going to say sky, and I guess it is if that curved line is a hill, right? I removed the stencil and the mask and I raced away to get them clean before the paste dried on them. While that dried, I worked on my silhouette element. This time I'm going for a snowman from a Jillian Vance design. I absolutely cannot have a black snowman, so I cut it from white. And if he didn't have a hat, I would have left him like that. But he does have a hat. And I need a black element on the card, so I glued his hat on top. I also decided to add my 3 black dot embellishments as buttons. I have a little container where I keep all the black dots I've cut, and I sorted through to find 3 the same size to use down his belly. This die comes with lots of accessories that you can decorate him with, but I think he's great like this for my silhouette element. And here's where I did a little experiment. I really wasn't sure if it's okay to spritz shimmer spray over dry paste, but I wanted the shimmer on the white background to help to differentiate from the snowman. I don't want him disappearing on that ski hill. And it seemed to work fine. So this time, in some ways, I'm closer to Brennan's card, but in other ways, I'm further away. I included pink this time. My stamp sentiment is in the same location, but I modified that diagonal line to include a curve. My silhouette is white, and my dots are actually playing a role, not just embellishments. I also ramped up the techniques by using paste. For the final level, I decided to change up that diagonal masking element. It really is the thing that has most tied my cards back to Brennan's, and I'm still including it, but this time it's different. I started by trimming my 4-inch square panel into 4 2-inch squares, and then I masked each one diagonally before putting navy ink onto half. The navy is going to play the role of the black, similar to the green I used earlier. I taped the panel together so that the triangles are forming kind of a pinwheel. I love how geometric this is looking. This time my silhouette element is a snowflake, and I chose one that will fit on each of the 2-inch square panels, so that rather than one silhouette, I'll have 4 on the card. I cut them from cardstock I had inked with the dragon fruit ink, and for my sentiment, I stamped that same joy word in the dragon fruit on a small circle die cut. And again, I spritzed the shimmer spray over the finished panel. Well, almost finished. I decided afterwards to add navy dots, both to the sentiment area and around the snowflakes, so I had to ink up a little more navy cardstock and spritz it separately before cutting the dots and adding them on. Okay, now the tie-in isn't quite as strong, but I've included the colors, except I used navy instead of black. I've got the diagonal element, although it's been multiplied, and then I made almost like 4 little card fronts instead of one big one. My sentiment is in the center, popped up on a die cut. Oh, I just thought of another one. I could have stuck with the air transportation theme of the balloon and done Santa's sleigh as a silhouette. So many options. Limes really provides a structure without limitations. You can use what you have and your imagination to create something amazing. It's all about inspiration. You start there and go as far as you want. Whether you make only one change and stick pretty close to the original, or make a few changes or a lot of changes and maybe only use one part of the inspiration, it's all up to you. Are you a fan of Christmas in July, or do you prefer to wait until closer? Let me know in the comments below. Now it's time to use this link to head to Brennan's channel to see how he was inspired by one of my non-Christmas cards. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.